call the meeting to order, 9:30. First up, we have 1.02, approval of the February 25th, 2026 Policy Committee meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting.
Okay. All those in favor? Everybody? Thank you. It would appear we have no public comments, so we'll move right on to 1.0.
I had already craned my neck to look.
Crowded in here today.
Yes.
Policy 510, copyright laws, which looks like it is a recommended decommission.
That is correct. So for those of you following along at home on the recording, it starts on your packet, page 9. The copyright laws policy was adopted in June of 2009 and has not been updated since. It is being presented to the policy committee for the second time. It was previously discussed on January 21st, 2026. Staff's recommendation is to decommission this policy. We did a review of other LEAs, and few have standalone copyright policies for this purpose. Most incorporate it directly into their curriculum policy. So that's going to be our recommendation, that we, when policy 500 comes before the policy committee, that we incorporate the copyright language into that policy and decommission this one.
Did we have this in the intellectual property one?
That's if staff create the works. This is
understood.
use of other works.
Okay. Gotcha. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, didn't we? I thought we did something.
So we'll look at decommissioning when we pair it with the review.
It will be presented to the board as a packet,
Together.
a couple, to decommission this and incorporate into 500.
Sounds good. Any objections?
No.
All right, great. Nice.
Oh, I need a motion and a vote.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. I was just
wondering.
wondering.
Policy 510 for recommendations.
Well, I think we're moving to send it to the board.
Moving to send it to the
Yeah.
board. There we
With
go.
policy 500.
Oh, there we go. So move to send this to the board with policy 500.
Yeah, there you go.
All of that.
I will second that.
All right.
Okay,
All those in
perfect.
favor? All right. That is
Are there any
that.
great objections to that?
I think it's great.
Combine everything together.
Simplify,
Yes.
yeah.
All right, 1.05, policy 515.
So for those following along, this starts on packet page 14. Policy 515 was also adopted in June of 2009 and not updated since. And as you can see, it is a robust 2 sentences. It was presented to the policy committee previously on January 21st, 2026. The recommendation is to decommission the policy and fold its content into policy 100. At the time when we met last or in January and discussed it, we talked about folding it into either policy 101, organization of the board, or 106, general powers and duties. Policy 101 speaks to the organization of the board, the creation of advisory committees, and the student member of the board role. 106 speaks to the general powers of the board, such as the ability to sue or be sued, to pass a budget, to retain legal counsel. Neither directly reference the creation or implementation of policies, whereas policy 100, in its addressing the board's responsibilities, does include adopting policies as part of its function, in addition to the legislative, executive, and quasi-judicial purposes of the board. So to staff, it made sense, since 100 is where it says you have the power to create policies, that you also include there that you have the power to waive policies. So that is the recommendation.
Didn't we just look at policy 100?
No, we looked at policy 101 to incorporate parameters for the board president's ability to expend
That was
resources.
101.
That was 101, correct.
Yeah, it's like,
101 is going to come around again in the next series, because we're about to start the 100 series anyway, so it's going to come up again. And
100 or?
100, 101, and 106, they're all going to come up.
But I mean,
Matter
when
of fact,
we look at this to put it in there.
yeah, the roadmap that we are working on developing has all 3 of those policies coming together, because they all interrelate in some ways.
Make more sense together.
So the recommendation for policy 515 is to decommission and fold its content into policy 100.
All right.
Can we get a motion?
Yeah, so move this to the board for recommendation to be folded into 100 and be decommissioned.
Second?
Okay.
All those in favor?
Do I need to speak up, or are you guys good over there? You're good. Okay. Just make sure.
We're moving right
Feel quiet over here.
They can look.
This is true too.
Right?
But am I even loud enough for video?
1.06, policy 115, responsible and appropriate use of social media.
So this starts on packet page 19. Note that there is an error on the capture, or on the agenda item cover page. It makes a reference to character education at the end of the title, and that I think is just a holdover from a prior iteration of this document. It's a typographical error. This was presented to the policy committee previously on November 19th, 2025. The discussion at the time was to decommission the existing policy and replace it with a new policy. Actually, if you look at the existing policy, it in terms of format is actually very similar to the format we use now. But when we got into diving into the content, it really just made sense to wipe it away and start fresh with a brand new one. To the point that we're even proposing a new title to the policy and expanding its scope from just social media to responsible and appropriate use of technology and social media. We do have other technology policies. We have one on personal mobile devices that, depending on how some legislation goes, we may have to revisit as well. We have a policy on data security, and we have a policy on technology acquisition. We have nothing expressly regarding the use of technology at the policy level. We have it at the regulation level, not the policy. So this is going to become the anchor for those regulations that speak to staff and student use of technology. The policy purpose is pretty straightforward: to set the expectations and guidelines around social media and technology use. The definitions are what they are, with the intention always to be in alignment with the definitions in other policies. There are 3 policy statements: a commitment to the responsible and appropriate use that facilitates community engagement and fosters relationships, models positive digital citizenship, and enhances education. An expectation statement for staff and students and board members to be good digital citizens, and a statement prohibiting engaging in disruptive electronic communications. Within the implementation, we start off with the expectation that FCPS technology is used to further the educational mission of FCPS. And that's really what the 3 subparagraphs in 1 speak to. A articulated statement that there is no expectation to privacy with respect to the use of our equipment and our electronic facilities. The social media section dives into, we encourage the use of it. Social media is a valuable part of the resources available to us as we communicate with families and staff and students. And so we encourage the use of it, but we encourage the use of it in the correct way. Including defining the role of public affairs as the body responsible for making sure that our website and our social media is appropriately in place. There is a statement on prohibited acts to make it clear that the board has an expectation that staff and students will not use social media inappropriately. That includes doing it during your duty time. If you want to be on social media, do it on your own time, not when you're working, not when you're in class. You can't reference that you are making a representation on behalf of the system or the board, because you are not. You speak for yourself. And then, again, a statement against the inappropriate use of personal communications to disparage and expressly addressing this notion that staff might friend students or become acquainted with students outside of the classroom environment. You'd think that that wouldn't be something we'd have to say, but yet, nevertheless, we get cases in front of us. I know Dr. Sergo has experienced having to review these where staff have inappropriately communicated with students, and so we want to have that express statement against that.
Except it says discouraged from. I almost feel like that's not strong enough.
Prohibited.
Yeah, I was wondering
Just
about
make a
that.
clear line. Yeah.
Well, because the issue is that we do have some. The definition of social media has gotten so broad, it's almost like every day it's different. And there are some sort of systemically approved platforms that one might describe as social media. And I'm thinking, Mr. Kendra, of some of the ones that athletics uses, like
Game changer.
and I don't know which ones they're using.
Team Snap.
Team Snap.
Changer.
Right, so we
Remind,
allow it.
Playmetric.
Allow it there. When we say friending, we're talking about, Facebook, Insta,
I'm still saying discourage from friending.
And I would say like
like-
Team Snap and those, like I've used Team Snap too, and those are almost like CRMs in a sense, right? They're not really social media in the same way that Facebook or Instagram, right?
I think if you look at the full sentence, and certainly we can revisit the language, but if we look at the full sentence, it's basically doing that for things other than work-related, non-legitimate purposes. So there's no,
Okay.
right, so it's like,
Definitely, wait,
yeah, like, I mean, we have some staff who've set up maybe, I'm making this up, an athletics Instagram or something like that. And so they're allowed to be connected to kids through, that has a legitimate purpose.
Like, post a picture that.
Right, versus my personal Facebook page, I should not be friending students for whom I'm responsible for, but if is that a good example?
Yeah, that's a
Perfect example.
I think that's
for
right.
Athletics.
Yeah, a lot of
Teams
them-
have their own, like football will have their own.
Oh, yeah.
And kids will follow their school's accounts.
And so there can be that sort of thing.
Actually, yeah.
That makes sense.
But our employee code of conduct is very clear that you're not allowed to have students on your personal social media. And so that is very
And then
clear.
how would, so like PTAs that have booster programs and that sort of thing, have Facebook pages and all of that?
That should be fine.
Okay, all right.
So PTAs, boosters, they're not FCPS, they're not under our control or authority, so what they choose to do is their business.
Okay.
I would certainly discourage them from,
Right.
inappropriately but we don't have any authority or control over them, so it's.
Yeah.
I do wonder, to your point,
Yeah.
if we might want to massage this, because so friending can be one way or reciprocal.
Yes, it can.
Right, and so I could choose to follow, the high school football team, but that doesn't mean they should be following me back. And so I do wonder about sort of maybe we could massage this to talk about, we can accept friend requests or whatever the right language is for legitimate purposes, but that we shouldn't be following or, I don't know what the right words are, for students' personal.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Personal is, and I feel like
But maybe that's the only way it works with Instagram, I'm thinking as the example, right?
Yeah, and sometimes, I know, when I was a principal, a lot of coaches actually use that as an opportunity. Students lose scholarships for things that they put on their social media.
Yeah, they're sort of monitoring it.
So there's a little bit of helping students learn how to use that appropriately. Also, a lot of, this has changed, Kevin can speak to it, sometimes recruitment for athletics and things can happen through social media. Kids are posting videos of themselves, and then coaches can share those videos with college recruiters. So there is some legitimate.
It's the personal, if you were.
I was gonna say
It's about, it's inappropriate personal. So if we might want to just revisit this to make sure it's really clear. We're talking about personal stuff, not legitimate work-related purposes.
But also, even just because of all this conversation, and it does, to your point, change so frequently, a reference for questions, please, maybe we point them in the right direction of the regulation that
Right.
says this
If
is who
you
you would
are-
call. If you have a question about making sure that that you're following the policy and the regulations appropriately.
Oh, and we find that when people don't follow it, they actually think they were, or they don't, or they just flat out aren't aware.
Yes.
So, and when we redirect people, they're very quick to either take their post down or.
Exactly.
I mean, they're doing.
It's a difficult space. It is. It's just a
it
hard
is, but
space.
it also sort of seems more clear cut.
Yeah.
Personal is the line. And FCTA goes over this like every year, watch personal use of your phone, it can be MPI, and watch your posts on Facebook. But I think also, I sort of almost would suggest pulling out or a sub, like, that there are legitimate FCPS purposes such as sports teams, extracurricular, whatever.
It's so broad. But we'll look at something to make sure that it's more crisp.
To get the personal, it's like inappropriate personal communications using social media, and then it goes on. I almost want that pulled back to make sure it's all
You almost need
connected.
a foil for what personal is, right? And the foil is like a Team Snap or a page about their football.
Yeah, the
team.
challenge with giving specific is like, I find this when I look back at the first version of the code of conduct that I wrote 3 years ago, it was like, YouTube, Twitter, now it's like, I don't even know half the things I'm telling people are not
I'm
supposed
not
to
suggesting you
pick.
pick. I'm talking about the
that.
parents, the sports teams, the ones we know that.
I think it's sort of school adjacent, right? So
Right,
and
right.
maybe that's what a student in the system, and I think we could do that.
Yeah, that's definitely.
Yeah, we could
good.
do that.
Yeah.
Thank
Keep
you.
it broad enough to not,
Yeah.
like, you know.
So you have to revisit it all.
And then I was just curious, I know like we're still waiting on MSDE with their AI policy, and I know y'all have done some work on that. And if there's anywhere that's, because the AI, once that comes down, I have a feeling it's gonna sit in a couple different policies for us, just.
In terms of what aspect
So
of
like, even AI is being used, like people's images, likenesses, everything, even from a sports, like even from a sports team or students in a club or whatever, and how that can be used to bully, harass, appropriate use of, all of these things. I just wanted to bring it up because I know MSDE is working on that and it's going to be coming down eventually. Would anything?
Well, they did already provide us, they recently provided us with the framework, and I believe there's a presentation coming before the board in a couple of weeks on AI.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it is in a.
So they are coming forward, something is coming up, it's on an agenda.
There will likely be a need to create a separate standalone.
Just
AI
a
policy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's what I wanted to kind of just.
It's gonna have to have its own thing.
Right.
I did want to mention and build upon something that Mr. Blivis mentioned, because it is something that I don't read the tea leaves for a reason, but I actually, from tracking bills as I do, believe this one will pass.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is Senate Bill 928, called the Phone Free School Act. Of all the bills that have been attempted, this one appears to be likely to pass. It actually has MSEA support, which I think in the past has perhaps been a hurdle, because as you recall, even from our own local conversations as it's related to this, because it's both about phones and social media, so that's why I'm bringing it up in this context. The bill passed unanimously in the Senate, and it's crossed over. It's now in the House Ways and Means Committee, and they have a hearing on April 1st. Essentially, it is going to require a district-wide ban on cell phones and social media, effective, statewide, effective the 27-28 school year. There are the regular exceptions we would expect around caregiving and IEP and medical, whatever, translation, things like that. And it will, I just predict, that this is going to pass. I think the sort of the tide has shifted around the sort of the discourse around phones in schools. What I think was a hurdle in years past, and as it relates to this, it's a prohibition on the use of phones and social media.
That's the.
And so it's just something to be aware of.
Prohibition of social media.
Use.
At all?
No, during the school day. Yeah, we can't, as Mr. Blivis.
No, but like for the school, for legitimate purposes, like athletic.
So I don't, until we see what, I don't remember that being in the bill. It was much more focused on students.
Student use.
In the past, the hurdle has been, and I say hurdle not in a negative way, but just sort of an implementation hurdle, has been, I think many of our educators and our staff feeling that the implementation or the management of a cell phone ban, for lack of a better word, would fall on them. So the language of this bill is a little softer, which is to say there isn't a required disciplinary response. But it's basically an off and away. So it's not a teacher-led confiscation or the use of yonder pouches, or it's what we do in our elementary and middle schools at this point, being extended all the way up through high school.
That's right.
I predict it'll come, although anything could change.
Can you repeat the bill number?
It's Senate Bill 928. Yeah, it was initially in the Triple E Committee, the Education, Energy, and Environment Committee. It passed unanimously in the Senate. It's now in House Ways and Means, and the hearing is on April 1st. So, but it is prohibiting the use of an electronic communication device by a student during the school day, except under certain circumstances. And then it goes on to define that, and then to says social media platform is an internet-based application, website, or digital service that allows people to create, share, or view content or interact with other users, because all the things that it does, and sort of, so we may need to revisit it, but I would imagine it could end up being a technical amendment.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, Maeve's not true.
See what the bill's for.
We'll have to see what the bill says, but it is. We would have to have a policy, which I think we sort of already do.
Yeah. You just might need to amend
And
something.
we're allowed to have tiered disciplinary measures, but it's interesting, and I'm sure Dr. Mershaw will appreciate this. The language in the bill says the disciplinary measures adopted under this shall be tiered disciplinary measures enforced by an administrator. So that's the language of it. Right. And because and the only way to get to something like that is by having a school-wide ban.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, but then, thinking about the instances where you might have, say, like an art program or even a sports program where part of it is, but they don't need to use their cell phone. They could be using a tablet, a Chromebook, or whatever to do the videotaping of a basketball game or something, and then using that in their art class. So it shouldn't interfere
Well, it's
with anything
devices.
like that.
It's not
Yeah,
just phones,
but
it's devices.
it's not it's devices, but they're not doing it for social media. Say it's for an art class or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a
I
prohibition.
don't think it's so
Devices.
prohibited.
Read the legislation.
It's the phone-free schools. It's very specific to,
Okay.
yeah.
I just was bringing
It's not a
that up.
technology ban, yeah. I mean, the definition in the bill is that an electronic communication device is any portable device carried or transported by a student to receive, send, or record voice, image, or text content,
That's very
including,
specific, yeah.
and then it does have a broader definition.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, we'll see how it goes down. Okay.
And you can take photos with your Chromebook. I mean, they do that. So if they're, taking a picture of an art project, or they can do a video that way, it's not as
Or
good.
like they're doing like
but-
their vlogs and they're it's actually for curriculum and it's not just for
Right.
the definition of an electronic device actually is pretty broad.
Yeah.
It's tablets, laptops, smartwatches, wireless earbuds, or headphones.
Exclusions for curricular activities.
There are exclusions,
Okay.
but not for curricular, not at the level of the classroom.
IEP.
This is an off and away policy.
Okay.
There will be no phones in schools.
Okay.
They can be on the person.
But and it's not just phones though, because like you said, it's a broad definition.
cell
So it
phones,
could
tablets,
be.
None of these bills come out the way they went in.
Exactly.
Right, so
That was in the
there
detail.
might be an amendment that would, if you're asking these questions, I'm sure others are as well.
Absolutely. Okay.
Well, the kids are smart. They know how to
I mean, they're using.
communicate on
Yeah.
Chromebooks, so.
They use
Oh,
Google
yeah.
Docs to get around.
Yeah.
There are ways.
There are ways.
All right, let's continue on with this policy.
Okay.
Yes. So, the implementation section continues with a safety and responsibility section to make clear that FCPS is not guaranteeing anything. We are not, we are monitoring for and filtering for SIPA, but we can't completely control. And this is language that I believe appears in other policies and regulations as well. We felt it was inclusion here as well. There's a training section, a violation section to indicate, what the expectations are if there's a believed violation. Report it, and then the potential for discipline. It will be reviewed every other year, and implementation of a regulation, which we already have. You'll note that there is a second number 4 that should be number 8. It's one of the wonders and magic of Word when the numbering doesn't come out the way it's supposed to. So the recommendation is to advance this to the board with edits, including clarification in D3C3 on discouraging and the friending.
I'll move that we move it on to the board.
Second.
All those in favor?
Just a connected question. I know that New Mexico has a landmark trial against Meta, and I think maybe a finding against them, but that's different from the one that's currently in California, I think.
No, they're all related.
Okay, because this is sexual exploitation.
It's all related to, it may be taking a different approach, but they're all related to social media.
Okay, because I just found against
All right. Sounds great.
So that brings us through the items that were information, discussion, action. The remaining 2 policies on the agenda are information and discussion only. The first is policy 509, extracurricular and co-curricular activities. We have with us, as you already know, because they've spoken earlier, Dr. Mirshaw, who is the director of high schools, Kevin Kendrow, who supervises extracurriculars and athletics, Dr. Kathy Gull, who just walked in, and Scott Murphy, who's sitting in the back. They're all here to provide support to the conversation, so if you want to come on up, you might as well.
Come sit.
We're all friendly.
We'll ask you questions.
The sun is out, we're friendly.
And actually, we have Colleen Bernard as well.
Colleen, if you want to sit over here. Sure.
you.
Hello, friends.
I don't actually know Colleen's title, but I know that she oversees a lot of the student
Queen of social stuff.
student activities that are like mock trial and student government and that kind of stuff.
That's true.
Her title is the Supervisor of Social Studies and Student Leadership.
There we go. Thank you.
Which is why, yes.
So this policy was adopted on June 11, 2008. It was last revised on November 10th, 2021, so it's actually not all that old. But this is the first time we are presenting it to the policy committee. We're here to understand what your interests are. We're not here to present any written proposals, although we have had some conversation about some edits that we feel need to be. So I turn the floor over to you all to ask questions.
Did you want to let us know the edits so we're not retreading any ground?
Yeah.
If you already have a
Where
couple
are your
edits that,
suggestions. Or-
Yeah.
Let's start with that.
So, I'll go ahead, Kevin. Lead
I'm
it.
sorry, what was the question?
So just where would you start with suggestions for edits? Where are the things that stand out that you would
Does
suggest?
that help on my computer? I apologize.
So I think that when we looked at it, we did discuss the academic standards for eligibility section and possibly wanting to clarify or spell out some things there, specifically around curricular and co-curricular activities and eligibility, and wanting to make sure that we're consistent. Our standards for athletics are pretty strict in terms of eligibility. We need to take a look at things like participation in drama, participation in clubs. What rules for eligibility will we apply and how in those situations? Are we being consistent across the system? And then what about those things that are like competitions, robotics competitions? Are we as tight with looking at eligibility when students are competing in those academic tournaments or other things beyond athletics? So that was one big chunk of our conversation, was around that piece.
Okay.
And even the section before that, the permitted activities, if you look at it, it's kind of wonky the way it's written, where extracurriculars are offered to students grades 9 through 12. Well, that's not true. That's not accurate. We do offer extracurricular activities at the middle school level. So that's clearly not the case. It's just a weird way this whole section is framed, and so it needs an overhaul for how it's written, making it more clear based on the different grade levels, what the opportunities are.
I think, and depending on what you define as extracurricular, I'll look back, I would say there are elementaries that have extracurricular clubs and.
Those were the two big items. I think it's just a little outdated because we began extracurricular activities at we always had them at the high school. We had a few at the middle school, and then we added elementary school. And so we definitely need to change that language because they all are offered at all three levels now.
Yeah, Challenge 24, they said there was just like 9 schools the other day involved, elementary.
And then also, as we've alluded to, just cleaning up some definitions and making sure they match amongst regulation and policy. We also have an athletic handbook, an extracurricular handbook that Dr. Bernard and I kind of co-chaired that committee, and to match those definitions would be very helpful.
I guess that was actually my biggest question, just going through this, and I guess, as we had talked about discipline and harassment, discrimination, and other policies, I wasn't thinking about a separate athletic book and that sort of thing. So then I went back and looked at it. So I'm glad you brought that up because you're already taking a look and align all of those. It seems a little bit odd that they would be so separate, it would seem, right? But I understand for extracurricular activities. But can you explain maybe the history of that for me? What you're thinking of in terms of aligning those, the disciplinary process of discrimination, and we've had that at basketball games or at other.
I know Kevin has
Kevin's maybe.
addressed that directly as far as athletics,
Yeah.
so he could probably speak a little bit better to that process. I'm going to bounce it over to you if that's okay.
Right, again, the question was.
Oh, I was just trying to wrap my brain around what I was reading in the athletic handbook and code for how we, work with students that has been, an issue with using racial slurs or other kinds of bullying and harassment or any of that sort of thing. And just and granted, the last couple of days ago was my first time going through the language of that. So it seemed a little bit different maybe than the student code of conduct and some of our policies. And maybe it's not really, it was just the language that was written in. So I was just curious about alignment between those. So there's not confusion, like, why would a student maybe have a different experience if something happened in a hallway at the school versus during a game, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. There's two things that we do whenever there's accusation or use of any type of discriminatory or derogatory behavior practices or languages. So we have what we added through regulation, our reporting process. That applies to the instructional day and extends to the extracurricular day. But we also have procedures that we've put in place, it's now been probably 5-6+ years, where if there is a use or an accusation during an athletic contest, we work with our coaches. I meet with all of our officials prior to each season, and the expectation is, one, they apply all appropriate National Federation of State High School rules. They stop the contest within the rules of that sport. They notify each head coach, athletic director, coordinator, and/or administrator on site. Then we begin an immediate joint investigation. So we have certain procedures in place. It's also, if you go to an athletic contest and it's an event where it's gated and they're able to play the systemic message, that's actually discussed in there as well. And that is also, it's everyone's job. They hear something, they see something, to report it, so we can begin, an immediate joint investigation.
And that's a good point, actually. At the Akita, there was a booster, I had put together a marching band sort of competition for folks, and they actually they did go through that at the beginning before anything took place, just to let people know who was participating, who were in the audience, what the expectations were, and so forth. So that was a good, thank you for bringing that up, that helped to remind me about that. Yeah.
If we play a school that's outside of Frederick County, we still ask our coordinators to touch base with the opposing coordinators and our principal to touch base with and what we advise them to say is, hey, we're not necessarily going to be able to control what you do, but our procedures in FCPS are that we report this to you. So we want to make you aware, and then I also make my counterpart aware if there was a situation or incident.
I have some stories, which I won't tell now, but, I'm just thinking of some situations with my husband, actually, when he was filming. Okay, I'll have to go back. But yeah, so I was thinking of the athletic policy, and I don't remember why now, but every time I signed it, when my kids did sports, I always put as much as anybody can actually, I don't even remember why, but I always put that qualifier because it's like you're signing like it's an absolute, and you can't absolutely, and I just was being ornery, but I'm sure it's changed.
And then the data reporting system.
I think Dr. Bernard had something to add to the.
And then in parallel with what we did in the athletics handbook, we have some codification in the extracurricular handbook around any policy and regulation that relates to student or staff conduct has been brought into that handbook. And we also attend to referencing the student code of conduct as part of participation requirements, serious acts by student leaders and how those are handled, and then overall student conduct, which is guided by our student.
And everything points to each other.
Everything points to each other. We did a lot of work in aligning policies and regulations to make sure that they were adequately and appropriately covered in the book. So it was great.
Thank you to Dr. Bernard for that. We also have a generalized statement that I believe is in policy. It's in our guide for student athletes and parents. It is any behavior that is deemed disruptive or detrimental to the team may bring consequences ranging from diminished playing time to dismissal from the team. So it's a broad statement that doesn't put us too much in a box, but does give some coaches and advisors flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going to say, the one word I'm not hearing here, and I know it's because how much do we control, is parents. So you just mentioned parents, because sometimes that's the most disruptive, especially when they're younger, I think. But so other than just general disruption, is there really, does an infringement go against a student? I mean, they can't control their parents necessarily, so that wouldn't be fair.
I believe Mr. Blivis brought up during our meeting, like, do we need to add anything or should be added about parental behavior at?
There is a statement, it is 509.3 in the current policy that speaks to the spectators who behave in a derogatory and disruptive manner. And I did ask the question, do we need to be more bold and explicit with, parents need to model behavior as well, and that disruption from the parents who are spectating is going to have consequences as well.
Yes, we do. Yep, 100%. Yes, we do.
We need to have language in the extracurricular handbook about volunteers and spectators as well as staff.
And I'd say too, like, if any feedback from any of the coaches and staff members who head up these extracurricular activities about this part of the policy, have they given you guys any feedback about what they would like to see to help them, maintain order?
I think our administrators do this already pretty well.
Okay.
Managing large-scale events, especially at a high school,
Oh, yeah.
is something that they do. We have an event coverage document that Mr. Kendro and I share. So for whatever the event is, there's a certain number of police officers, there's a certain number of security, there's a certain number of staff that are required to be there. There's training for the staff that are there. So they already have the procedures in place. And if there is, in the rare event that someone is disruptive to the environment, they have procedures that they can follow, which do include, if needed, asking for assistance from police officers if it's needed. But they can also just ask anyone to leave the venue. And if appropriate, follow up with trespass letters and notifications and communication. So they already do this. Yeah, they already do this. They already monitor. It's part of our safety plans that they have to have for any events that they have at the school.
I think it's true for any centrally sponsored events. The administrator in charge would have that same role. And anything large, we have.
I guess I was just looking more at like egregious behavior, disruptive behavior. It can be sometimes broad and it might be interpreted differently in different.
So to actually speak to that, so it started, I was actually part of, and I got to chair the MPSSA's sportsmanship committee, and we developed egregious behavior projections.
Okay, there you go.
So that started at the state level, then, and I'm going to brag on FCPS a little bit. We were the first county to adopt it during our regular season play. Now everyone adopts it during our regular season play. So we have 3 categories of egregious behavior. And so if you are a coach or a student athlete and you are ejected from an athletic contest, you have to sit a minimum of 1 contest. You have to take an NFHS, National Federation of State High School Associations, NFHS Learn Sportsmanship class, and you have to meet with your coordinator or administrator. If you are ejected based on an egregious behavior, that goes to a minimum of 2. And that is fighting, which includes leaving the bench area. So we have to train our coaches and student athletes that although you may be thinking if Dr. Mearshaw is involved in an altercation and I'm trying to go onto the field to pull her away, I am now ejected. You have to leave it to the adults to handle that. Fighting is 1. Any physical or verbal personal attacks toward others, and any use of discriminatory or derogatory behavior is automatically 2 contest minimum 2 contest suspension.
And that language is mirrored in the extracurricular.
Thank you for clarifying all of that. I appreciate that.
You know what I'm seeing with my Carroll County grandkids, one's in middle school, one's in elementary, and I think it's more the middle. Like my daughter and her husband are always talking about all the things coming in, and the parents will do, and it's like the parents are the problem. I'm like, is this still a thing? And you're nodding, saying, yeah.
And there are different cultures. I was going to different contests in different counties and different schools within FCPS, but also different sports and watching, like a track meet and a football game and a tennis match and the environment and how different those are. But many of our families go through all of those throughout the year, just because that's where your kids are, that's where their friends are. And I think that there is always, I feel like our coaches and our admins do a great job of establishing those expectations from the beginning. There are mandatory parent meetings before every season in every sport, and I mean it is laid out, and that that is your expectation, and they are very good about taking care of that, and and we do that on the music and theater side as well. People don't tend to get as rowdy at an orchestra concert, but you never know. Unless it's Wagner, right? But I do think that they do a great job, but they're very clear about it. And some sports better than others too. I know, like in track, for example, you do not speak to the officials. Like, they make that very clear. If you have a problem, you find any coach. And we will take you. Do not, because that's just that's the culture of that sport. In tennis, very different. Like, you have coaches that are helping make the calls, but either way, it's between the student and their coach, and they're very clear about that, which I do appreciate, and I think our county does a good job of putting that on the administration and our coaches, and I think I really do, like other schools, other teams that I've been able to see as well. I think they do a great job. So something is in there that is working for them.
That's good. That's fantastic, because some of the club and recreational leagues, it's not quite as clear, right? And there have been times where the cultures of those, if folks are doing that and then they come to our events, right, we have expectations that are a little bit higher for our conduct, and appropriately so.
Yes,
honestly, as adults. Yes, some of the reactions parents have had to, say, a 12-year-old referee of an elementary school basketball competition, right?
Yes.
Like, these are kids,
Yes.
y'all. So I appreciate that we're having a higher bar of standards, because that's what we want our students to exemplify as well. So our adults should be able to handle it, right?
So I'd also like to put some thought into the access and equity section in particular. So that section really only speaks to athletic activities, and I think that this access and equity comes up a lot when we talk about athletics, but also extracurriculars and co-curriculars, when we start to talk about financial investment from families and participation, as well as just what's available across the county, and maybe even some discussion about how community partnerships contribute to what might be accessible in particular schools. So like at the elementary school level, the plays are really only available at the school. Well, there are partnerships that make those available, and it's not every single elementary school. And maybe just thinking about how we're framing access and equity, and what is available and what isn't, and what the financial equity looks like for our families, for students to be able to participate.
And for special education kids, and we'll talk about adaptive programming. Anything y'all would like to add to that?
No, that entire section is about athletics.
Yeah.
That's an excellent. And I think as I was reading through this, I thought, oh, well, this just applies. But I am the one that's using that equity word a lot when it comes to music and drama, because that's where my kids have been. I'm like, well, the athletics, they get buses everywhere, and the band didn't. And so how do we, you know what I mean, those kinds of things. So I agree to broaden that section to include all of the extra and co-curricular.
I think that probably was in place because interscholastic athletics are really the only extracurricular activity that's tied to COMAR. So the MPSSAA is a branch of COMAR, branch of MSDE. So my guess is that's why it strictly, I do think we need to expand, but that's the reasoning behind that.
Well, I think clarifying that too in the policy, making some of those connections so that it's clear. And also, I think from the policy perspective, from the board perspective, we want to support equity and access for all of our students. And so I would that, but also acknowledge where MPSSA and COMAR play a role.
MPSSA is in there, it's in the next section. I don't know that screams out to people necessarily,
But as they're revising it.
Well, but a thought comes to mind, if we start putting in here equity, are we now responsible for paying for band buses? And that's a financial cost.
Maybe we're not responsible for paying for athletic
Buses.
I think that having a review of how our own internal audit of that, right, would be good, right? It also help for transparency's sake. This is a question.
The conversation goes beyond obviously just policy, right?
Yeah.
There's budget implications, but from a policy systemic process, I would think we would want to speak to our commitment.
Right. No, I agree, because it talks about something there, equitable opportunity. I was looking more for the financial aspect, and I thought I just did, because then it definitely goes on to like special education students with adapted physical education. But I was looking really for, financial.
I see it in A, but
Funding,
just as
there
a
we
word.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, in A about Title IX and the implementation of the athletic program. It's the only funding spot I see.
Yeah.
Making sure that that's also in there as part of the policy statement. But I have a feeling this is going to, after you all take a look at it and revise and beef it up, it's going to come back with a few extra pages.
And with the access pieces you talked about, as Dr. Murchall said earlier about eligibility and grades.
Yeah.
We have a belief that there is a delineation between athletics and the Rubik's Cube Club after school, where it should be open to everybody regardless, right? So we'll bring forward some language around that really meets that.
That would be great.
Fantastic.
Did that lunchtime.
Yeah. And I think this whole discussion also just reveals like how we all look at this, and we focused a lot on the sports already because a lot of the language is there, but we didn't see necessarily the other language for the access, the equity, these other clubs, the chess club. I mean, my cousin was on the football team and also had on the chess team, like on the chess club. So any of these sort of things, they can find that information in the same policy. It's helpful.
One of the things that I noticed is that it says extracurricular students represent the school. So that's where I'm thinking like my lunchtime Rubik's Cube Club, we didn't, which there are competitions you can do, unlike the Challenge 24 that involve 9 schools where then they are. So there is kind of that delineation. You wouldn't say, wait a minute, what are your grades to come have lunch and work on Rubik's Cubes? So it's the representing the school, I think, that also.
Yeah, because there's the robotics clubs that we have. So like the Minerva one, like they would go to a competition. They're representing this whole system, really, right?
Do
Not
we
just their-
make them have a
Yeah.
certain grade? I mean, that's where it comes in, that you have to.
And the Olympiads and the other folks, and oftentimes there's only a handful of high schools that are involved in that. I don't know how that works. That's not, but that's something. I'm sure there's some confusion we could clarify as well.
Yeah.
And maybe, I guess right now, maybe it goes, maybe that's led more by the administration of your school. I know in Walkersville, our school is very strict about eligibility, and it's across the board. It's marching band practice, it's the drama field trip, it's football games, it's anything.
Okay.
So they definitely, they're very, very excited about that. Keep your grades up, you stay eligible, and then you can participate. And I mean, that is something that keeps a lot of kids coming back to school. So I think that's a good, it's a positive environment.
Absenteeism rate too. It's helpful to
Yeah,
have.
absentee, and they talk about best grades are in their seasons of eligibility.
Yes,
But even how like band class can sometimes be, if it's more of a, it just depends on the student, right? That thing that's going to be the hook for them to come back. Yeah.
Have we given you enough to
That's why I think it's going to be a few extra pages. That's okay.
anything else that you want to bring up? As it relates to
This is definitely one of your wheelhouses, right?
This is my wheelhouse right here,
And so Comar, it was only the athletics, is what you're saying. So nothing in Comar relating to music and arts and visual or any of those other things. Interesting.
Mark just states that in regards to grades 9 to 12 interscholastic athletics, school systems have to have a way to demonstrate students are making satisfactory progress toward graduation.
Okay.
That's why eligibility requirements differ LEA to LEA.
Each school system can decide their own. We have to have an eligibility criteria, but each school system sets their criteria.
Years ago, we're talking probably 20 at least, I think it was up at Middletown, they actually had a community discussion on making D not eligible, like you had to get a C or above. And that really went away because after hearing public comment and all, it was decided that we want to encourage them, not discourage them. Corollary athletic program is, it's defined, so that's good, but is that a term in Comar?
So corollary is a generalized term for the athletic program for students with and without disabilities. So it's kind of like an umbrella term. We partnered with Special Olympics Maryland and offer unified.
Unified, that's the word I'm worried.
Corollary is the generalized
Okay.
term for those athletic programs.
Okay, I wonder if we could throw unified in there somewhere,
Yeah.
just since that's what we use and what
I think
people
we may
might.
have had that recommendation.
Yeah. Not take corollary out because it is defined, but put unified in.
To include unified programs, yeah.
And I wanted to just add, I think something that is very easy to talk about the athletic program because it comes from our school system, right? It's all, and then when you get into some of the other things, that comes from your booster organizations. And so the money comes from different places, and I think that's where it gets very gray. You know, and we talk about equity because, you know, I know that I just paid $190 to be on the track team, but I also paid like $400 to be in the marching band. But our school cannot pay that $400 to be in the marching band because that did not go to the school system. And so when you talk about equity and you talk about inequity, you know, it's also gray because that's not, the money doesn't all come through. It comes through different places, which is why that booster handbook is very helpful too, to kind of, you know, and that's a whole different book. But just when you were going back to look at all of these things, that's adds some gray to me about that if we're going to talk about some of those events too.
I feel like historically, perhaps those uniforms for marching unit, like, and I say historic, like 60 years ago, maybe, had been part of the school system. I don't know when that all came about.
I can tell you, in 1995, we purchased them. They were bow ties. The first year we called them the Waiters. There were less than 20 of them. But after that, the parents purchased we raised money and bought the uniforms. And the stadium lights.
Okay.
Anything else on this one?
Thank you.
I assume some of you are staying.
That's correct.
Huge controversial.
So the next policy, 1.08 on the agenda is policy 516, teaching of potentially controversial issues, use of historical artifacts. It begins on packet page 39. This was adopted in May of 2021. It does not appear to have been updated since. Actually, it's information discussion only. We're here to hear from you, but I will tell you that in discussing it, we don't have a whole lot of recommendations for it, other than applying our template, which this is all in some ways already in that format. We don't see too much change is going to be needed to this policy, but we want to hear, of course, from you as to any suggestions you might have. And I do keep my panel of subject matter experts here to help answer any questions.
Having, if you remember the picture in the paper of TJ High School with the shades left open and a certain flag in there, kind of when it came up, I imagine. When the policy committee was reviewing this before, there was a recommendation, I believe, from the Racial Equity Committee to take the word controversial out of there. Now, I was on CNI, but I like to read what they're doing in policy, and I'm just reading it without controversial. I'm like, it's called teaching, and that's what we do every day. Do we need a policy for that? So I suggested they keep it in there because there's a part in, I remember, with how teachers will approach it. And I think we have those expectations that teachers will be objective in their teaching. And so I think that's important to keep that aspect.
We agree. This is a policy and a reg that I think we as a community should be proud of. Having come from another district, we didn't really have anything along these lines. We point to this policy all the time in the world that we live in as guidance to our teachers. Dr. Bernard recently presented to social studies colleagues across the state, and as a result of kind of being seen as having a flagship policy around this. So we feel like it's pretty solid, but absolutely want to keep the language in there because we point to it all the time.
Absolutely.
Did you hear any feedback from other LEAs who don't have this type of policy about policy itself when you were presenting?
In a broad sense, they wish they had a policy similar to this that would guide them in navigating these these potentially controversial issues. I think our reg does a really nice job of defining a controversial issue, so it's not the totality of anything that somebody thinks is controversial. You know, we do have some specificity there that helps guide us. And then the guidance that we provide our teachers, then what that allows me to do as a supervisor and my other supervisor, the other supervisors on our floors within our disciplines, this is what it looks like. These are our principles of practice that are guided by our regulation and our policy. And that allows us to help our teachers navigate, you know, at the shifting sands of what is controversial today or tomorrow.
And students need the opportunity to have those discussions in a social studies class about, you know, but to do that, teachers need to have some policy and regulations that they know that they can be, that backs them up, you know, and how to approach it and so forth as well.
What is currently considered a controversial topic? I mean, you know, you want it to be broad, you don't want a list, but you talked about shifting sand, so I'm curious, like, what are the signals that you look for as a supervisor that sort of tell you that a topic may be subject to this versus not be?
When there's, and I'm going to go to the language of the reg, exists significant opposing viewpoints and or multiple perspectives. And it just is part of the principles of practice in our discipline that we're always looking at, we're not on the single narrative. We are interrogating the historical record, which requires us to look at multiple perspectives in order to construct our own understanding. That's what we're teaching students, not what to think, but how to think, right? And so that's all part of that process.
So sort of the spirit of the instructional approach is we don't teach history from one lens.
Exactly.
Right. And I think that's important because I think sometimes schools are accused of a myopic view of a historical event,
Right.
and you're saying we interrogate those events from multiple perspectives.
Part of our-
This is encouraging the ability to do that.
That's exactly what it does. It provides the guardrails for our teachers to engage in this, but also gives them license to engage in it. And that was what we were trying to strike, that balance when this was created.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Is there any need to include in the policy something around employee code of conduct, or like how,
And how they,
if there is a accusation or something that a teacher has instruction.
So like someone's taught something in a way, right. I mean, I'm sort of
Like a
thinking.
link to how.
I'd be curious what you think about when it says compliance. It says item A, that principals in consultation with your team have approved issues to be considered. So what we'd be looking at from an employee perspective is someone who didn't follow that process. So that's like any sort of other insubordination, right? Like, there's a process you're supposed to follow before you go and do something. You didn't follow that. Did you not follow it because you were insubordinate, or did you not understand what you were supposed to do? And we would work with the curriculum office to make that assessment.
Paragraph C in that section speaks to the teacher, the expectation on teachers, and that's where the board is articulating it. I think going deeper into what happens if you violate that expectation is either employee code of conduct or regulatory. It's going a little too deep.
I can tell you there were situations that came up with friends of mine in the past, so they're retired now, but one showing a Faith Ringgold painting in an art class, and just kind of laying it out there and explaining the author's motivation, and then and I think Missy Dirks had some issues at Brunswick also with people coming back on what she was choosing to share, you know, artwork that she was choosing to share with the children. So sometimes teachers don't think of something as controversial. I think that's where
It's the intent, right.
Yes.
I think that's where our guidance helps guide that. Is it developmentally appropriate? Is it aligned to the curriculum?
That's also
If there's a no to any of those criteria, then we're outside of it, and then we have.
No, and I believe every time it was connected to curriculum and the teachers did not, because a couple of art teachers that I'm thinking of now, and it's like they didn't think of it as controversial and ended up being, or a friend was teaching about like Martin Luther King, okay, and boycotts. And then kids didn't know what boycotts were. And so it says, well, like, say there are some people that choose not to go to Walmart and then got flack from a parent. You know, so again, it was not necessarily expressing their point of view. So I think with the policy, that part's really clear.
Yeah, and helping the administrators to understand.
And it's across subjects, right? So I think that's important, because we see this in English and science or whatever. And I guess my question is, for compliance B, obviously with the obvious, some of the terms have to be changed because we don't have the AAE office. The training, is that a compliance module? The annual, is there an annual training?
I am responsible for training my teachers. English Language Arts would train their
But is
teachers
it
in
annual?
curriculum every year.
And how is that done? Like, is that done in that pre-service curricular week?
Yes.
As well as throughout the year.
Yes.
So there are,
No, I was gonna say, we also did a compliance module this
Oh, it
year.
is,
Oh,
okay.
I'm sorry, I misspoke.
No,
It
no.
is in that 516.
I just wanted, just double checking, because
Yep.
we had to your point, an attestation process to make sure people take in these annual reminders of all of these.
yep, so there's the asynchronous module, there's the personalized delivery through curriculum, it's the in the moment when things happen. When in the moment a controversial thing happens in our nation or in our world, Dr. Bernard usually takes the lead with some reminders about this policy, the reg, helping teachers prepare, because part of it really is helping teachers prepare to walk into their class that day.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of in-the-moment stuff that happens that's associated with this policy and the reg.
Yeah, that's really,
Resources from the training.
so that's really good, because I remember the one day that I saw my students first thing, because I taught in the afternoon, was the day after an election one year, and they all came in all hyped up. Well, normally they would have done that in the morning, and I just had to I just put a stop to, because it was like, yeah, we're not gonna.
I wanted to ask just another question I was whispering over here, which is, does the board have, or anyone think there's an interest in changing the title? Because you talked about it being across disciplines, and not to diminish that historical artifacts is a strong anchor. I just wonder, and I guess I'm thinking of two things, not only the title, but the idea of something being controversial. So for example, I know we've had to confer with you and issue guidance around when election outcomes happen, when we've had, whether it be January 6th types of events, or people who have been killed or assassinated. It's that sometimes people say controversial meaning opinionated, but controversial can be anything to which people might have differing viewpoints that is inside of the discourse. You talked about teachers feeling like, I gotta walk in tomorrow. When I think about October 6th and that between Hamas and Israel, there have been other things where people are looking to us as a school system to provide them with the structure for managing the multiple feelings that might come into their instructional space. And so I guess I'm wondering, does this speak to that? And if not, do we want it to? And number two, should we change the title of it to be more inclusive of what it sort of by label might suggest? I'm offering that just for consideration.
Historical artifacts came definitely out, that came why the policy came, so maybe that's kind of died down.
I would just be cautious about moving away from the title in as much as this then becomes applicable to everything. And it becomes too all-encompassing of this is a part of all curriculum now. Because the reality is, everything we teach has multiple sides to it. And this isn't intended to focus on everything that we teach. This is to highlight the controversial, the truly explosive type conversations that might happen. The in the now conversations, I think, is a great example of that. Coming out of the October 6th, that's a controversial, highly emotionally charged subject. This is here to help with that. Is this really needed to help with the day-to-day discussion of why Columbus came to America?
But I think that's how it's currently.
It actually does. That would cover that, because some people would find that controversial.
And honestly, the current.
But that's the point, though, right? It can't. If we say that everything becomes controversial, then nothing is controversial at that point because it's too all-encompassing. And so I would hesitate to move away from a title that would allow it to be applied more broadly.
I would agree with that, and also the historical artifacts piece is really important in, that gets met out in the regulation and then in guidance we give about static displays in classrooms versus, and that's room decor,
Right.
versus the use of an artifact through the course of a lesson and what we do with that, right? And so that guidance is really important in, especially in the social studies space, but in other spaces as well.
I would say.
In all of our spaces.
And I like the historical artifacts as a teacher or somebody else, if you're looking for guidance, you'd be looking for something, the language, right, and a title around that. But to the point of what even Mr. Blivers was saying with, I can remember history classes, the best ones were talking about the current events in the beginning and how that applies to what that is, is happening. Is there a space, maybe not in the title per se, but if we're talking about current events, guidance, do teachers realize that they can actually use this as guidance for that as well? Because I feel like I get like a mixed response, feedback, I guess. Yeah.
All part of our principles of practice.
Yeah.
Current events are an integral part of the social studies, and as such, connect to, and we provide that guidance and training to our teachers.
Yeah, I was just feeling empowered for them to do that, and that they have, we're giving them the policy that they can use for it, I guess. And all of that.
So the takeaway for the conversation is I would not anticipate there being significant changes. This already will fit nicely into our current template. We'll update, obviously, the references to offices that don't exist, the Accelerating Achievement and Equity staff, that's not an office we have anymore. Curriculum Instruction and Innovation actually isn't the title of that department anymore either. So you'll see little updates like that, but I would not anticipate big changes to this particular policy. Both this policy and Policy 509 are anticipated to be presented at the June meeting, which will wrap up our 500 series. And that brings us to our upcoming policy meeting. There is no April meeting. Our next meeting is May 20th. The tentative agenda, although not necessarily in this order, is 117, anti-racism for information discussion action. 508, special education for information discussion action. 511, assessments for information discussion action. 513, distribution of informational materials for information discussion action. 500, approval of curriculum and instructional materials for information and discussion. And 501, selection and approval of library media materials for information and discussion. And we also hope to have a roadmap for 26-27 ready to share with the committee.
And then, if I may, we were finally able as a CCAC to have our first meeting of the year, because the other two have been canceled due to weather-related events. But one of the questions that come up about the public comment, because they're doing their 2 minutes for them, but CCAC falls under CSAC, and they just wanted some more guidance in the policy, because my understanding is for them, limiting that to 2 minutes for public comment is perhaps for CCAC, they fall under CSAC and a whole different set of COMAR rules and standards for that may not, what we put down in 102 may not apply, may or may not. There was some question about that. I know we had talked about it maybe a couple months ago. They wanted some more clarification, whether they should stick to the 2 minutes.
They should stick to the 2 minutes. That is our policy, and the local CCAC is not governed by the requirements of the...
CSAC doesn't have any, okay.
But it's CCAC, I mean.
I feel like CCAC is under CSAC. They're not.
They're from the state.
That's the CCAC, we are required by the state to have a CCAC,
Right.
but how we operate our CCAC is up to
Entirely
us.
on us, okay. All right. 'Cause I know the 2 minutes have been a bit of a thing for them at those meetings.
Anything else before we adjourn?
For the AI policy that'll be coming forth shortly.
Well, by the next
I'm not.
meeting, by the next
It is,
meeting, we should know all of the results of the legislation too, so we
Yeah,
can
that's
see
helpful.
what
That's
additional
helpful. Yeah.
things
Yes.
we're gonna need to look at.
Yeah, I think that's
Great.
good.
We will adjourn at 10:39.
Okay, wow.